Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com. This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott, episode 30 for July 6th, 2007, Shock and Ennui. Windows Weekly is brought to you by Audible.com. For your free audiobook, visit audible.com/windows. AUDIBLE.com/windows. It's time for Windows Weekly, a weekly look at all things Microsoft, not just Windows. Oh no, my friends. Windows Mobile, Zune, Xbox 360, what else? Media Center Edition.
Surely they do other things.
They must do something else. It's Paul
And
Thurrott.
don't forget Microsoft Surface.
And the Surface. It's a big-ass table.
It's a big-ass table. And that's going to be my new Surface super site coming soon.
Super site for Surface.
Super site for Surface.
He now does a wonderful site. I highly recommend for anybody who's a Windows user, particularly a Vista user. It's a super site for Windows, winsupersite.com. And, of course, his blog is internet-nexus.com. And the new book, Windows Vista Secrets. They're not secret anymore, thanks to Paul Thurrott. And it's available from Wiley & Sons. Am I right?
Yes, you are.
I am.
And actually, we didn't discuss this ahead of time, but I should mention I am currently working on the second edition. And one thing I'd like to, I guess, extend the offer to people is, I can't really have readers' names throughout the book, but certainly we could have a page of people who have contributed. And if you have tips or secrets of that sort that you would like to see appear in print, and then hopefully we can get your name in there, we can do that.
Good. How should they get a hold of you?
They can't. It's a mystery. That's the first secret.
Secret number one, Paul's address.
First, you have to find Paul. No, it's the same as ever. It's just my name at gmail.com, and my name is THURROTT.
Last name, Thurrott at gmail.com.
Yep.
And you can send your tips. Does that happen? I mean, I guess you were writing this book really before Vista came out, so it makes sense that now it's out and you had some time to bang on it. Do you find a lot of new stuff?
Sure. I mean, I did that tip series on the website. Is all stuff that happened, after the book. I mean, the problem with writing a book like this is you need to get it published in time, for the release of the OS. But, a lot of the stuff happens post-release. Plus, this book is going to be based around the release of Service Pack 1. So there's stuff that's happened since Vista has come out that we'll be covering in the book. That Windows Live stuff we talked about, like Windows Live Photo Gallery.
Right.
Just new, just new stuff. So
will you get Service Pack 1 ahead of time? No, right? I mean,
yeah, I assume that they'll have to beta test it. Sure.
Oh, okay. So you will have.
And typically, book authors have access to a sort of beta-like, web page where they can download things and so forth. So, people who are working on the books would get nightly builds of the operating system as it was getting near completion and so forth. So,
that's neat.
hopefully we'll do that this time as well.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
One of the things you'll be writing about, of course, is those fantastic Vista Ultimate Extras. So glad they've come out with so much wonderful stuff.
Have they?
Well, there's that Texas Hold'em.
Texas Hold'em.
You can't knock that.
I told you the
I'm
story
sure there's more.
The Texas Hold'em was supposed to be in Vista, but apparently they went through some sort of legal process and they realized that gambling was
problematic.
problematic.
You can't really ship that out
in certain locales.
Yeah.
So they had to take it out. So it became an extra.
Well, all right. Well, if you're not going to talk about Texas Hold'em, what about that fabulous beta of the Motion Desktop? That's pretty...
pretty unupdated.
Yeah.
Several months.
Yeah, still beta, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah,
I mean, it's funny because if you look at what they've shipped, there isn't really much. There's the two things you've described. There are two enterprise-oriented BitLocker-related tools, which frankly should be available to any business user of Windows Vista. I mean, they arguably should just be in the OS. And and that's it. This is not an exciting group of add-ons. And
sigh.
Well, I when they first announced this, I immediately decried this as a huge mistake because, previously this is the type of stuff they would release as a plus pack.
Right.
And at least with the plus pack, you had the notion that this was it. And obviously Microsoft releases other freebies, Power Toys and so forth. But I think it's somewhat notable that as Windows Vista has come out, and now it's been, 6 months or so, 6-7 months, whatever it is, there isn't really a lot of that stuff. And these Ultimate Extras, these downloadable things, that would make Ultimate Edition all the more valuable, have turned out to be not very valuable at all, and not surprisingly.
Oh, dear.
I read a story today, by the way, that supposedly the people working on these things have sort of disappeared.
The Ultimate Extras team is gone?
Yeah, I don't know. I would put the word team in quotes. I'm not really sure.
Fellas.
It's the guys who occasionally spend time in the afternoon while they're not napping. I don't know what's going on here. I mean, so this is an embarrassment. I think this is just
and there's been news about it lately. People are complaining. Yeah. Microsoft's finally said something, right? That they're sorry.
Yeah, they made a post to their blog and they said, "We're sorry. You're right. We should have been releasing these more quickly." And what they have promised is that by the end of the summer, they'll release the final version of that Dream Scene motion desktop tool. They're going to release various language packs, for the Windows multi-language user interface. And vaguely, over the next couple of years, they're going to release other stuff. It's exciting. It's the wow starts now.
Where the hell is the wow? It seems like... I mean, here it's been out now for 6 months, almost 6 months, 5 months. Where's the wow?
I don't know.
It's selling because it has to sell because you can't, pretty much any new computer will have it. Is the general impression that people have of Vista is that it's good and nice and we love it?
I think that most people who get Vista like it quite a bit, Although I have some disturbing anecdotal stories from friends where they have actually purchased new computers recently and specified XP, which of course caused shivers down my spine. But apparently in each case there was a crucial work-related application that they needed that wasn't yet Vista compatible and so forth.
And a lot of people who I think thought about upgrading to Vista looked at the price, looked at the compatibility issues, and have said, "Well, I'm going to wait at least till Service Pack 1."
Sure.
And that's probably good. That's probably a good idea.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I don't. I use Vista every day, and I love it, and I could not go back to XP. But I also recognize that I think we're in a different era now. It's not. We're not going to have the big bang excitement of Windows 95. People aren't going to rush out to the store and stand in line for something like that. It's desktop operating systems are just pervasive. They mature. They work fine.
Right.
XP does not have any glaring errors.
Maybe that's the problem, is there's no really compelling reason to upgrade.
Yeah.
Besides Microsoft saying you ought to do it.
Well, there's neat stuff in there. And again, it's I think Windows has reached the point that Office reached some time ago, which was, at least until they hit Office 2007, where you're really looking at these sort of incremental updates. And for people who really use the stuff, it's valuable. I know as a writer, it was crucial for me to upgrade to every version of Word, especially because the grammar stuff was always updated. The spell checking was always updated. There were certain things in there that just made life more efficient. But, when I look at someone like my parents or my brother or sister or someone and, they say, well, should I upgrade to this thing? It's kind of a tough sell because what they're using already is fine.
Right.
It's not like there are any glaring issues.
Right. Well, there is going to be a Service Pack. Service Pack 1 is going to come out in the fall. And there actually hasn't there been some information about what's going to be in Service Pack 1?
Yeah, a little bit. And not in the sense that Microsoft has ever stood up and said, here's a list of things we're working on, but, dribs and drabs over time. The recent Google stuff, which we'll get to.
That's a Service Pack 1 update.
Yeah, they're going to change instant search in Service Pack 1, which, frankly, I think is a mistake, but whatever. We know that they're changing some of the security stuff so that third-party security companies can write applications that will access the Windows Vista kernel in ways that were possible with Windows XP, but aren't currently possible in the shipping version of Windows Vista. They're going to be upgrading the kernel in general just to bring it up to speed with Windows Server 2008. And
even you don't sound enthused.
well,
is it the heat or the?
I am wilting away here.
The heat or the ennui? What is it exactly?
My excitement for technology is occasionally not as
it's waning.
It goes up and down.
It's waning. Well, Google did go back to the table and has more complaints about Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
It's not over. It seems like the last 3 or 4 weeks we've had updates on this.
It's like the Jason from Friday the 13th thing where they keep popping up when you think he's dead.
Well, nothing will ever go on as long as the U.S. DOJ prosecution of Microsoft, which
sure.
I remember when we launched Tech TV in '98, that right after that was our first scramble. And I think when Tech TV went under in 2004, we were still covering it. Nothing had happened.
Arguably, this is still the same story, right?
It hasn't changed.
This is the 21st sequel to that same story.
Yeah, because Google's complaint is essentially that Microsoft's using its dominance on the desktop to freeze out competition.
Sure. And they very wisely are using the language that the U.S. government used in the trial by referring to instant search as middleware and saying that, hey, this is the same thing as a web browser. It's the same thing as an instant messaging program, a media player, an email application, whatever.
Right.
And, I have to say, in general terms, I think that what Google is doing is wrong and that their complaint is baseless. But I do listen to this complaint where they compare it to other middleware, and I think, it is sort of like that, isn't it?
Right.
And, okay, but Microsoft, as we've been covering here, has made some changes last month. They agreed to make changes that they'll be doing in Service Pack 1. They're sort of half-hearted changes. They don't go the full distance. I mean,
but even so, you're not happy with it. You said that they shouldn't have done it.
They should never have done it. Well, I think this sets a bad precedent. In the wake of all this stuff, and actually, it's no longer the wake because now, of course, Google is complaining yet again. But somewhere in the middle of all this junk. Microsoft actually, someone from Microsoft came out and said to Google, you guys should learn a lesson from us because you are going to come under antitrust scrutiny as well.
Yeah.
And you need to understand that sometimes working with people actually works a lot better than attacking them. And they used, the compromises that they've made over the course of the last year in Windows Vista as an example of how, Microsoft has worked with the system rather than trying to fight it.
Uh-huh.
But, we talked about sort of love of technology there for a second. I mean, when you look at something like Windows Vista, which is an operating system and it has certain features and so forth, you can look at it from a technical standpoint and say it's good, bad, or indifferent for these reasons. I find it somewhat disturbing that Microsoft is a little too willing to kind of break the thing a little bit and make it a little stupider and a little sillier and a little less obvious in a bid to, quell these complaints. They don't go all the way. They don't do what Google wants. If they left the thing alone, I could at least look at it and say, okay, either one of these things would be good for users. But this sort of half-hearted gesture that they're doing, they're just making it worse. So I'm disturbed by that because it seems like they are too willing to compromise. And in this case, I think they've compromised over something they didn't need to compromise over.
Yeah.
And as a result, Windows Vista will be
less good.
Less good. There you go.
Less good. So
it'll be dumber. Yeah.
Dumber. So what does Google want now? What's the latest?
Well, nothing new. It's the same thing again.
Are they unhappy with what Microsoft's done?
Well, yeah, and they should be because what Microsoft is doing is dumb. But
even from Google's
doesn't
point
really.
Of view.
I'm sorry.
Even from Google's point of view, I mean, aren't they giving?
Yeah, because Google? No, because it's what it really is a minor improvement. In other words, Microsoft clearly surveyed the situation and said, if we make it look like we're doing something, the states and the DOJ will say, fine, the fight's over.
Right.
Thank you for fixing this without us having to go through some lengthy legal process.
Right.
And that's what they did. And from Google's standpoint, they look at this and they say, well, hold on a second, they didn't actually do anything here. This makes things a little bit better, but this is not what we were asking for. The last week at the hearing, Judge Colleen Kollar-Catelli said, I'm not really interested in Google's complaint. It is the DOJ and the states that are here representing consumers. And the states and the DOJ both said to Google, we're satisfied with what Microsoft has done.
She's saying Google has no standing here.
They have no part in this.
Right.
This is a legal complaint that goes back, as you noted, to 1998, and Google was never a party to this.
Google didn't exist.
Right. So, Google's saying, but hold on a second, but we're the company that apprised you of this latest violation, and you did get Microsoft to change it, so clearly something is wrong. We think we have valuable information here about how they're not going far enough. And obviously they're also looking for technical information about what it is exactly Microsoft intends to do.
Yeah.
And of course, what Microsoft intends to do is half-hearted and dumb. And
right.
It's really going to make Windows Vista, would you say, less good? I guess.
Windows Vista, less good.
Less gooder.
Less gooder. Not so good as it was before.
Yeah.
I
don't like that.
You're so bored with this whole thing.
I just don't, well, like you, I mean, I've been covering this thing for so long. I mean, people, I get occasional emails, especially back when this was a hot thing, when the trial was going on, and people would say, "Oh man, I'm so sick about reading this. Why do you write about this all the time?" And it's not because I'm I'm in love with this topic. It's just it's
That's
news.
The story, right? They asked me why I talk about the iPhone, because it's the news, right?
It is news, right? And the Google thing is news. I mean, other than the fact that basically the judge said, "I'm not interested," and Google saying, "Look, we know you're not interested, but here's the complaint again. Please listen to us." So next week or whenever we come back next, we might come back and say, "Well, the judge said again, I don't care. Stop bothering me." I don't know. Who can say? I don't know. So.
I know something you'll be excited and stimulated by. It's something a little closer to home. The state of Massachusetts has decided to support the OXML standard. What the hell is that?
Right. So this is Microsoft's new open standard, and now it is an open standard, but it's the new document formats that they introduced with Office 2007.
So they decided, instead of going with the open document format, which is the open source one, and that's the one, by the way, that was supported by Peter Quinn, who resigned a couple of years.
The somewhat controversial CTO, I guess.
CIO,
CIO of Massachusetts, yeah. I've been meaning to look him up because it's. I think the full story of this must involve his role, because when Massachusetts announced this stuff, 3 years ago, he was sort of spearheading this move to drop Office and go open source.
Right. Which I actually support. I think it's smart. I mean, why should you tie yourself to one company when there's an open document format, which Microsoft could support? In fact, I think does some support for, right?
For ODF, you mean?
Yeah.
They do now. So, I mean, back when this complaint occurred, that wasn't the case, right? So a lot has changed in 3 years. Microsoft has really... I actually think of this as one of Microsoft's really smart moves, but also... a legitimately open move, where they've opened up their own Office Office document formats as standards. Right, ECMA has already ratified it as a standard. ISO is looking at it right now. They've also gone to ODF and helped. Either I don't remember if they just financed it or if they actually did some technical work, but they helped in the creation of ODF converters for Microsoft Office. So if you want to use Office and work in that format, you can. And apparently this has been enough for Massachusetts. So they're sort of opening it for comments until the 20th of this month. But the expectation is that when that happens, that Massachusetts will use a combination of OXML and ODF. And the big news, of course, is that they will continue using Microsoft Office, which is what Microsoft was really shooting for.
That it doesn't. The format isn't. I mean, they're also going to support text and HTML, but
sure.
So it's really more that we're going to keep using Office.
Well, they have tens of thousands of state workers that use Office, have been using Office for years. Moving to other Office suites would be difficult. In some cases, actually impossible. I don't remember the details, but I remember that they evaluated OpenOffice and found that it just didn't do certain things that they needed.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, that's okay. You
I
got to use the best
too.
tool for the job. The job of the state is not necessarily to foster these open technologies. You got to use the best tool for the job.
Exactly, right. And Massachusetts isn't the only government entity at any level that's doing this, right? Of course, there are governments all around the world that are also making these same evaluations. Some have gone open source, some have stuck with Microsoft.
The key is to support is to keep these documents in some format that is open, which they clearly are going to plan to do, so that you don't have to use Office to read them, for instance.
Right.
And
I think
down
that,
the road, if Microsoft disappears and Office disappears, you still have documents that can be read.
Right.
And that sounds like they've done
just
that.
for the record, Microsoft's never going to disappear, Leo.
Oh, yeah?
That's never going to happen.
Oh, yeah, because we'd have to stop doing this podcast.
On the episode of the Planet of the Apes where they go into the old New York City, and there's still a Microsoft office down there.
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised.
It's never going away.
It's like IBM. It's institutional. It's part of the landscape.
Yeah. It's funny. The conversation has changed so dramatically. I mean, I never really felt all that excited about closed formats versus open formats, et cetera. But obviously, things are changing now, and Microsoft used to look at these closed formats as some of their, family
jewels. Yeah, the bread and butter.
So to speak. Yeah, I mean, now that's not the case, very clearly. So they've opened up. I think what they've basically decided is that there's a much bigger market out there if they just open that stuff up, and that they can actually grow their own business as well.
Yeah,
and
it's good for them.
If that makes everyone else happy in the meantime, fantastic. So.
I wonder if part of the reason they didn't open it was that they hoped to lock people into Office, and I think they've now realized that's hopeless.
Sure,
you can't.
And not to. I mean, and frankly, when you look at governments like the state of Massachusetts or Western European governments at any level, these are candidates for Microsoft Office always.
Right.
They're never. Most of these places aren't going to switch right down to Open Office or a web-based Office or whatever they might want to use. And maybe in the future that won't be the case, but right now you just have such an established workforce, and this is what they're used to, and it's very powerful. And even though some of these other tools do a lot of what Office does. You miss. I do. I've tried Open Office numerous times, and I always miss things.
Yeah.
When I go to Open Office, it's just the way it is.
Perfectly reasonable. I think that again, it's use the best tool for the job, and obviously Word is the best tool. But just it's good for them to be aware of this issue of formats, and certainly Microsoft is, and I think the state's doing a reasonable thing at this point.
Right.
Moving right along, we have avoided so far. Did anybody write you an email saying you guys didn't mention Apple once last episode? Did anybody say anything?
Nobody did. But
nobody noticed.
I did get a lot of positive feedback from last week, however. They didn't say it. It was almost a subliminal thing.
Yeah, unconsciously.
I don't know what it was, but this particular episode was great. I can't put my finger on what it was you didn't discuss.
At one point, you said the word Apple, and I deleted it.
I blew it, yeah.
I
told you before we started, I would be the one that would blow it.
I can go days without saying the word Apple. People may contest that, but it's true.
Yes, see, and apparently I cannot.
Well, it's you know what? It's hard if you're talking about technology just as it's hard not to say the word Microsoft. These are the big players. What are you going to do? And exactly. Apple has been in the news big time, and I think to some degree stolen a little bit of the attention that might be due Vista.
And the Zune.
Let's not.
And Microsoft Surface.
I think actually that this week Apple sold more iPhones than Zunes have been sold.
I think we all know that. I think
Apple's on target to sell more than 1 million iPhones by the end of the month.
By the end of the month, yeah.
I think by the end of the week.
Well, I don't know how to say this in kind fashion, but I noted to a friend at Microsoft, let's just say that, and I understand that this comparison isn't exactly fair because they're different markets, but when you look at launching products like the iPhone or the Zune, the one thing you have to keep in mind is that there are really smart people at both companies. They can look back over the years of experience in these markets, and they can look to the success of the iPod and say, what did Apple get right? What did they get wrong? What should we emulate? How do we do this? And when Microsoft did that, they came out with the Zune, and when Apple did it, they came out with the iPhone.
Yeah.
And I think the comparison there is very stark.
Well, comparison not merely in the technology, but even in the marketing.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Right. Just the market excitement. How could you possibly launch something like this in January and not just maintain the excitement, but actually build excitement so that by the time this thing ships, people are waiting in line, and every news agency on earth, from the the smallest local newspapers up to the biggest New York Times type news titans of the earth, all covering it with equal zeal. That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Of course, that's all I'll say about that, because who really, I don't care about that too much. I think ultimately what we need to think about is, whether this thing is a technical accomplishment. And
well, you bought one.
I did.
They accomplished that much.
I did. Yes, that's right. I did, and I like it. It's buggy. I will say, it crashes fairly frequently in different ways. I'm not all that excited about several of those built-in applications that I know I'll never use or just don't care for. But I can look at certain things. The phone experience is awesome, and that's true just across the board. If you're manually dialing a phone, if you're getting a call or looking at voicemail or whatever, that stuff is fantastic. Mail, it depends, I guess, on what service you're using. You use your other phone was Windows Mobile, I would imagine, yeah? Yep.
How would you compare the experience? Actually, experience is a bad way. Clearly the iPhone experience is pretty amazing, but functionality-wise.
Right. We have to talk about so many different things to understand the differences. Form factor. I think it was Stephen Levy who basically said, if you look at an iPhone and you compare it to any other smartphone on Earth,
those
other
phone.
smartphones, well, they look like Soviet-era machinery.
Yeah, I love my Nokia N95, but it's exactly the difference.
And that's true. So, and that shouldn't surprise anybody. Obviously, Apple gets design.
One's the Volga, one's the Mercedes,
Exactly. Now, on the other hand, the smartphone that I have, the Motorola Q, any Windows mobile-based smartphone, if you have Windows Vista and that awesome new synchronization tool,
does that work?
Works very well.
Oh, good. Okay.
Windows Mobile syncs wonderfully, and if you're just looking at things like contacts and calendar and email, that stuff all
Hey, there's no to-do lists on the iPhone. It just baffles me.
Right. Well, that's very typical. So Apple gets the swoopy transition stuff. You can flick photos and you can scroll into websites, and they always miss these little obvious things.
To-do list, please, Apple. I don't need to know what your stock price is.
This is corporate mentality, because this is a company that develops something like the iPhone in utter secrecy,
right?
And then ships it to the world, and then people react to it. And then what happens for version 2 is Apple goes back and actually, for the first time, looks at what people have to say about it and makes those changes. And that's not the way other companies work. So, unfortunately, when you're an early adopter of an Apple product, this is one of the things you have to deal with. There are some stunningly obvious things that it just doesn't do. But, it's beautiful. I've had some serious sync issues on Windows, and I don't know, if it's my machine or what. I'm going to do a lot of testing. I don't want to complain about that yet, because I can't honestly say that it's Apple's fault or whatever. I don't know. There's all kinds of stuff to talk about. The built-in camera, for example, typical, beautiful, 2 megapixels.
Huh?
Takes the best pictures I've ever seen from any cell phone ever. Doesn't have a flash
or a zoom or a white balance.
What?
Or a video.
So the Q has both a flash and zoom, 4 levels.
Although let's be fair, the flash is anemic. It's not really the flashes on any of these phones.
Actually, the flash on a Q is like a.
Is it? It's like a strobe.
It's like an X-Files flashlight. The thing it's kind of crazy. Actually, you have to turn it off because it's almost eye damaging.
Really? Wow.
But yeah, you're right. Usually right. That's usually true. I don't know. Like I said, the phone stuff is wonderful. The one observation I posted about this morning I had was, I brought this thing over the Mac. I restored it. I don't have any music on my Mac anymore, because I moved all that stuff over to Windows.
Right.
And I synced it with iTunes, and I synced it with my Yahoo account for contacts, which then brought those contacts into Address Book, which is actually a little bit of new functionality. Yeah. You don't get that on the Windows side, by the way. I thought that was interesting.
That's interesting. Huh.
I was able to subscribe to my Google Calendar through iCal, and that synced to this, no problem. Worked great. But what I noticed was and this should be obvious, I guess, if you ever had a smartphone, you sync things like contacts and calendar. That takes up absolutely no space at all on the hard drive or the in the storage.
Right.
And it made me wonder why they don't make an iPhone Nano that's 2/3 the size, has almost no storage, and is just the phone.
Oh, interesting. It's because people are calling for it in the other direction, which is more make an iPod.
Yes, I think they should do both.
But why not make a simpler phone?
Right.
Well, just make the phone. Who knows? They may well plan to do that.
Yeah, because I can tell you, my wife looked at this thing and said, it's beautiful, but this is worth $200 to me.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised. I bet she would pay $200 for just the phone part of this, because she's never going to flick through music. She's not going to browse the web. She's not going to, look at photos and things like that. She just doesn't care about that stuff. And although, I will tell you my first and very bizarre iPhone success story, which is I was in a Barnes & Noble on the 4th of July. And I was in the travel section, and I saw a woman looking at a Rick Steves book about Rome. And we just went to Rome this year, and that was the book that we took. Mm-hmm. And so I don't actually approach people in stores usually, but I said, excuse me, I sorry to bother you, but I said, we just went to Rome, and I just wanted you to know if you are thinking of buying that book, that's the one we took. It's fantastic. It's a great book. And she's like, oh, great.
Nice. That's good. Yeah.
And then it suddenly occurred to me as I'm talking to her that I said, there's this place you got to stay that we stayed at. And if only I could think of the name of the place. And then I realized I had my iPhone with me, and I actually have pictures of the place on my phone.
Oh, wow.
So I pulled the phone out.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was really bizarre. And this never happened.
It almost is like you set this up. Perhaps you'd like to see these pictures on my new iPhone.
Right. So I'm actually flicking through pictures of this bed and breakfast in Rome that just happened to be on my camera. It's really random, but so I was able to show her, and she said, "Yeah, that's great." And so, she got my email address, and I'm going to hook her up with this.
Right.
With this place, but I actually had this little impromptu iPhone demo in a store, which was just the weirdest.
Now, did she notice that you were doing this on an unusual device, or?
Oh no, I pulled it out, and she said, "Is that the iPhone?"
Is that the iPhone?
And this is an older woman too.
Yeah, the awareness level is very high.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I think it's a really good iPod. I mean, it really does. It's great for showing video. It's great for showing pictures.
Yes. I agree.
I listen. I never listen to music on a phone. I mean, I think that always struck me as something. Why would you want to do that? And
because you've used a phone, and the battery life is horrific.
Exactly. But on this, I'm listening.
Battery
to
life is fantastic.
It's good, and I'm listening. I'm listening to my my Audible books on it as I walk to work, and it's in a way. I mentioned before when we've done the Audible ads that I feel bad I don't have a commute because I don't get the listening time I used to. But now I'm listening all the time because I always have the phone with me.
Every one of these things, though, there's a but, and it
is a but. I agree.
Is a big but. Well, it's a great iPod, but if you want to do anything other than pause it, and you have, if you want to flip around to the next song, you have to pull the thing out of your pocket, turn the screen on, navigate to that application.
Oh, wait a minute! No, not true. No. If you use the white headphones that come with it with the little microphone. Pressing it once will pause, but pressing it twice skips to the next song.
Oh, nice. Okay, so I knew that paused. I didn't realize it did that. That's good. So actually, that's very useful.
That's typical of Apple, where they'll overload a button with multiple functions. I mean, look at all the functionality.
Well, sure, because they don't like to put extra stuff in there.
Right. They're a one-button company.
No, that's good. That's okay. So that's acceptable. And I
mean,
really like
you can't go backwards. You do have, and you're right in the sense that I do pull it out a lot to turn it up, or to just jump ahead, or to try something different. So. You do have to. There isn't an easy functional control, although that could easily be an accessory that somebody might add.
The big problem with this, I'd have to say, is not anything related to the device itself. It's just the network, and a lot has been written about how lousy the Edge network is that AT&T has, and I have to tell you, not enough has been written about how lousy the Edge network is. Because
you could write more.
It is so bad.
It's really slow. Yeah.
I've been using EVDO on the Q for several months now, and I can connect it with
EVDO is great.
Yeah, and I never realized how great it was. I can use it as a high-speed modem via USB cable with my laptop, which I do on the road. It's nice.
Yeah, I just bought the Verizon EVDO dongle. USB dongle, and it's great. 1.5 megabits down, 300 up. I mean, it's like broadband.
Right.
Imagine that on the phone.
Yeah, so we were outside, and I had this phone, and I was browsing around with Safari, and I kept complaining about how slow it was. And, my wife said, well, actually, we're in a kind of a dead spot. I always have bad reception here. I mean, I'm sure that has something to do with it. I said, that's interesting. Actually, maybe I'll bring out my Q here, and I'll put them side by side, and I'll browse the same sites.
Interesting.
We'll see how it goes. And I can tell you, it's a joke. the EVDO, using whatever that Internet Explorer version is in Windows Mobile, those pages come up, almost immediately.
Oh, so it's the phone. It's not the network.
No, it is the network. I'm sorry, because Q is on EVDO and iPhone is on Edge.
Versus EVDO. Okay, yeah.
It's just so slow. And same sites. I could load 3 websites before Safari brought up even a single site.
Oh, yeah. There's no comparison.
Yeah, it's bad.
Comparison. I think I don't want to make this the iPhone show, and it isn't.
Well, it did just come out. I guess what I'd say about it from sort of a Windows standpoint is, if you're thinking about it, the things you need to understand are it is not Exchange compatible, contrary to what you might have read, unless they've enabled IMAP on Exchange,
which most companies will not do.
They won't do, right? So if you rely on Exchange, you just forget that for now. Although clearly there will be Exchange solutions coming down the road. If you just use Microsoft Outlook, you should be all set. Although I've had my sync problems, I'm not going to chalk those up to anything endemic, because I can say on the same machine, I have absolutely no problem syncing on the iPod with the same exact data. So I've had no problems with contacts. I've had lots of problems with the calendar. I'm going to go back and do that again. So I don't want to, say anything quite yet. If you use anything other than Outlook, just forget it, because on the Windows side, you can sync with a couple of different contacts things: Windows Contacts, or I guess Address Book on XP, and that's it, or Outlook. And as far as syncing calendars, you only get Outlook, and that's it. So if you don't use Outlook, you might want to just move along. If that stuff is important.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I have mixed feelings as in terms of it as a smartphone for business. I think you're probably not going to use this.
It's not quite there. No. Yeah.
It's a consumer device.
Yeah, it is a consumer. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it's funny, the big innovation here in many ways is they've made something beautiful. They made something really elegant. I'm sure it's going to get better over time. But what they've done is they've really caused people to start spending more money on these things. And,
in a way, that's a good point. Suddenly awareness as to this as being a more than a phone, but a computing device.
Right. You could spend $100 and get a cheapo phone,
right?
Like people do. Or you could spend, several $100s, maybe, hopefully less in the future, and get something that's significantly better in many ways. And I think that, the tale will be told down the road, I think. We need to see how the third-party stuff
that's
happens.
The key. A lot of what we've talked about could be amended by simply opening it up to third-party applications. And Apple has to do that. I don't think there's any choice.
I guess there's no chance of this happening anytime soon, but also to other wireless carriers.
That's not going to happen. And according to USA Today, they've got a 5-year lock-in with AT&T.
Yeah, so there you go. Talk about propping up a single partner there. But okay.
I don't get it. I really don't get that.
This thing with EVDO and the ability to use it as a modem, I would be all over this thing.
I agree. Let's take a break and talk about Audible, since I brought it up, and we'll come back and talk about Xbox 360. We're getting letters, lots of them. But this podcast, as usual, is sponsored by the great folks at Audible.com. Paul and I are both Audible listeners, and we think you ought to be too. This is just a great way, if you've got an iPod or almost any MP3 device, many smartphones that works on the Q, works with, I think, on any Windows mobile device. You can listen to books, and not just a couple, but almost any book. Great choices. And we invite you to try it absolutely free by going to audible.com/windows. That's our special page, audible.com/windows. Now, you can sign up there absolutely free. Try any book. You don't like it, cancel, no obligation. So you get a chance to hear any book. But we've got a recommendation for you, something that you're listening to right now, right, Paul?
I am.
What is it?
Yeah, it's called Blood and Smoke. It's by Stephen King. We mentioned him last week, and it caused me to sort of go back and see what was going on there, because previously there wasn't a lot of Stephen King material.
Yeah, when I first started using Audible, there was 1 or 2 books, and I wanted to hear The Stand. There was a lot of Stephen King I would like to have heard.
Well, it's all up there now, from what I can tell.
The Shining is, Carrie, The Dark Tower. I wonder if Salem's Lot. I wonder if they've got The Stand. I'll have to look and see. That would take you 4 years to listen to. That's the only.
I know. It's exactly 113 hours.
It's so long. But what's the one one you recommend is a little shorter, I think.
It is a little shorter, and it's actually one of the lower cost ones, for whatever that's worth.
Well, you get it for free.
It's three long stories, like novella type stories, and I believe that these were previously also in a part of another book. I think it's called Everything's Eventual. Mm-hmm. I believe that these three stories appeared in there as well. So if you buy the Stephen King books, he periodically puts out these collections of stories. Not instead of a single story, it's several stories, and I believe that these three appeared in there, but it's been a little while. So one of them is 1408, which is the story that was recently turned into a movie. So that's actually playing in theaters right now. But
really? I haven't seen that. What's it about? Is it about the year 1408?
No, I believe it's about an apartment.
It's an address. Okay.
That's number in 1408. Yeah. So it's a writer of ghost stories.
Yes. Okay.
Spends a night. So anyway, I love Stephen King, and again, I feel kind of bad about the recommendations in some ways because I realize my taste is the same as everyone else's. But
that's why it's good. Instead of some trying to show off some highbrow, highfalutin stuff like I do, you talk about what you're really reading. I read or listened to. I see. It's funny when you do these audio books. People go, "You didn't read it, you listened to it." I always say I read because it's just like reading it. I read On Writing, which was his amazing. If you're a writer, you've got to read On Writing. It's both about writing and about his life. In fact, he wrote it shortly after getting run over.
Exactly.
It's very dramatic. He reads it as he does the one you had described.
As a writer of sorts, obviously I'm not the same kind of writer as he is, but I'm always interested in when authors write books about writing. On the tech side, Neil Stephenson wrote a book called In the Beginning is the Command Line.
Oh, really?
Which, if you haven't read, is absolutely fantastic.
I have to read that.
Yeah. It's a little out of date now because back when he wrote it, the BOS was still a viable alternative, and his story is basically, not to get completely off track, but he lost data on a Mac laptop and decided he was going to go and do something different. And what he ended up eventually moving to is, I don't want to ruin it because it's insane, but he's a really technical guy and an awesome writer. And
but
so
he
what
hand writes his stories.
No.
Well, he hand wrote The Diamond Age.
You should read that, but maybe back then he did, yeah.
No, his Quicksilver trilogy, they have it at the Science Fiction Museum.
You're kidding.
He wrote it with a fountain pen on lined paper.
Okay. All right. Well, he is a freak. Well,
he wrote.
I tried to read that last summer. And
it's hard to read. Imagine writing it.
Yeah. I actually read the first two.
Did you?
I never made it through the third. I just can't. You got to be kidding me. I mean, they're insane.
Handwritten.
I don't.
Yeah, it's very dense work. I love Cryptonomicon. One of my.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the best books ever. And of course, Snow Crash. It's a classic.
Yeah. By the way, both of those are on Audible. Let's not use up all our Audible books.
Okay, right.
We'll save those for another day.
But Stephen King, so he doesn't talk as much about the technology in On Writing.
No.
Which I was really kind of hoping for because he actually also is a guy who very early on in his career was using things like word processors.
Oh, interesting.
Well before the general public, had really moved to that kind of technology, which makes sense because he's a professional author. But
and he's prolific.
Yes, but the story of his accident and how he recovered from that is fascinating, and it's
and about his writing process because he may not talk about the technology of it, but he does talk about how he does it.
Right.
I just found that just fascinating. It gave me a whole new respect for him, and I've always had a lot of respect for him. But
and I think we said this last week. A lot of people gets pigeonholed into the horror thing, but he is he's got to be. I mean, I just think he's such an amazing writer, and anyone who can write books as complex as The Stand, for example, he's just on a different plane.
The other audio book of his on Audible that I've read is Hearts in Atlantis, which was wonderful. They made a movie out of that too.
Oh yeah,
but that's a short. Those are 2 or 3 novellas. Really, it's pretty long. And
back when these things were books on tape, when I had surgery on my knee, 17 years ago, and I had the stuff on some of his short stories on cassette, and remember being in the hospital with a Walkman or whatever,
right,
listening to that stuff, and it was this weird 3D effect of a fly buzzing around, and so I've been sort of I've read most of his books, but certainly have enjoyed a lot of it on audiobook as well.
It's and that's why one of the reasons to get back to audible.com, get back to the commercial part of the show. People say, well, you do the long ads. They're really not ads. The ad is around the book recommend. We're doing a book pick is what we're doing.
Sure.
Now here comes the ad part. for those of us who listen to books on tape, when Audible came along, what a revelation. I mean, I have on my iPhone 4 or 5 volumes, and there's still music and pictures and a lot of other stuff. You instead of carrying around cassettes, shipping them back after a month, you can have it as long as you want. You can download it and listen to it again anytime. Audible.com. Get a free book by going to audible.com/Windows. And we thank Audible so much for supporting all of the Twit netcasts. It really is nice to have them on board since I'm such a big fan. And so, it's funny how many of the Twits are Audible listeners. It wasn't planned. It just happened to be that way. Right. So Xbox 360, we mentioned this last week, and I have been flooded by email that says you estimated about 30% failure rate, 30%. Which is astronomical. It's
unbelievable, yeah.
And I'm hearing people say, no, it's higher. It's 50%.
Sure.
I don't know if there's any stats, but
no. I mean, all I can speak to is the circle of friends I have that all have Xbox 360s, and the other ones are sort of nervously, fingering the controller, waiting for the end to come. Yeah, I think it's very clear, and we talked about this. I went to Microsoft, I saw the devices, and I said, I don't understand how you're going to squeeze this into a little console. But clearly what we've got here is some major heat problems.
But it's been out for a year. You'd think that those problems would have been noticed and rectified by now.
Yeah.
Are they coming back? Or does it take a year to fail? What's the deal?
You see lots of stories about units that come back from Microsoft and they have different heat sinks on them. Or they replace the DVD drive with something more efficient or something. Yeah. So I think what we're going to see, I find it amazing, by the way, that they put out that Xbox 360 Elite and didn't change the internals of the box. That was just astonishing to me.
Because they're going to have the same problem.
Absolutely. So I think that this, coming Christmas or whenever, they'll come out with that long-awaited Rev 2, which will have the not cheaper, but the cooler and more energy-efficient chips.
It'll be the size of a refrigerator, but it'll be cool.
At this point,
what are they going to do?
Who cares what it looks like? I mean, why not just
Let's make it work.
You can make this thing twice as big and have it run cool. I think a lot of people would be A-okay with that.
You haven't lost any yet.
I've lost 2.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's more than 50%.
That's 100% for me. But
okay.
Yeah, and unfortunately, one of them Microsoft gave me for review.
That one died?
Yeah. Well, but to be fair, I'd had it for probably 15 months, by the time it died. But when I actually tried to go through the normal support channels because I had heard basically at that point that they were replacing anything, that it wouldn't matter. But they looked me up and they found that it was registered to somebody, I don't remember the name anymore, Billy or something. And I said, no, that's not me. And they weren't going to go anywhere near it. So I had to go through the PR channels. And
is there a guy at Wagner Edstrom named Billy?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. Yeah.
We got Billy's.
I don't remember. It might not have been Billy.
He could have been one of the developers. Yeah, that's what happens often with these units. Typical. They're registered to somebody either at the PR company or at Microsoft. They just happen to be registered. Well, mine hasn't died yet. Now, when it dies, what do you get? You get that three red rings or whatever that is?
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways it can die, but the typical way, you get the red ring, the red ring of death, and that's what happened, in both those machines. And it was funny because they well, not funny, but funny, coincidental. They both died within days of each other. One was, like I said, 15 months old, and the other one was quite a bit newer. But they shipped me, so I replaced them, and all they sent me was the box. I had to clip the old hard drive off and put it back on the new box, etc.
Oh, interesting. Well,
it's a ticking time bomb.
We hope that you don't have any. This is when they'll fail, of course, is during the dog days of summer. We hope you don't have any Xbox 360 failures. May all your frags land healthily and properly. And
may all your video gaming be cool.
We are going to sign off for the week, but we're going to take a week off next week. I'm in Vancouver. So, but if you've got,
and we should do a live show next time.
Yes, I was going to say that we're going to go live on TalkShoe in 2 weeks hence.
Yeah, I guess we're a little behind.
Yeah, I forgot that we even said we were going to do that. So we will do that.
I don't know.
Our next, we'll do it.
I just show up every week and
just hope that I've got something together for you, huh? Yeah, this time I will have something together. We'll be doing it live in TalkShoe, 1 p.m. Pacific time. That's 4 p.m. Eastern. on Thursday, July 19th. So if you have a question or a comment or a suggestion for Paul, that's the time to get into TalkShoe.com. You might want to download the client ahead of time so that you're ready if you want to participate as a caller. You don't need the client if you just want to listen. We'll stream it on Stick'em, too. That way people can see it as well as listen to it. That's Thursday, July 19th. Meanwhile, don't forget to, they're backing up. The hate mail truck is backing up right now, so I'm going to have to run.
I was going to say, is that the beeping sound?
Yeah. They come every Thursday afternoon. Usually it's after we finish with a dump truck full of hate mail.
Stop talking about iPhone, jerk.
Exactly. Just put it right on the lawn with the rest of it. Oh, man. We are going to wrap it up. Remind you that audible.com/windows is the place to go for your free audio book. I was, usually say U.S. only, but we've heard some reports that it works in other countries too. So give it a try. Who knows? Paul Thurrott is available online at the super site for Windows, winsupersite.com. He's also the news editor of Windows IT Pro. And look for his book, and better bookstores everywhere, the Windows Vista Secrets from Wiley & Sons. Paul, thanks. We'll talk to you again next week. Or 2 weeks, live.
Sounds good.
Take care.